The first budget hack I ever remember in my household was when I used to Blu-Tack a couple of small coins onto the top of my record player's tone arm stylus. I did it so that my copy of Crisscross Jump wouldn't, well, jump while playing. Unknowingly to me at the time, I was effectively turning my record needle into a vinyl destroying axe that was slowly carving a permanent canyon into one of the greatest musical masterpieces of all time. The next fix was the iconic cartridge blow. If my copy of Theme Park wouldn't load, you'd pull that grey slab out and give it the full force of your 8-year-old lungs. And when I got really desperate, I'd start blowing into the console itself. Of course, today, we now know that what we were doing back then was coating those copper pins in a delicate layer of 1980s saliva, speeding up the corrosion process. But still, not only did it work, but back then, it felt like science. Dodgy dealer DIY hacks have been around longer than all of us, and although some of these jerry-rigged monstrosities have worked out fine and are quite nostalgic, others were secretly causing a whole heap of damage to our home media. And as consoles got more powerful, they also got more fragile. So when your £300 investment decided to give up, many of us didn't reach for the warranty card. We searched online for a quick fix that did more damage than good. Today, we're looking at those DIY fixes that weren't really fixes at all. From cooking your motherboard to using those same coins from my childhood record player to literally crush your console back into life. These are the most notorious and most dangerous and most cowboy DIY hacks in gaming history. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. A few weeks back, we looked at the official way to kill your console with the Nico Intercooler Disaster, the professional looking parasite that literally melted your hardware for the low price of 20 quid. But today, we're going off grid back to the front lines of the Great Red Ring War of 2007, where the clueless cannon fodders of the 360 community army crawled their way into the desperate world of the bedroom engineers to perform a very dodgy hack. Yes, I actually did this one. And, to be fair, let me know down below if you had a similar experience, because for me, it actually worked. Well, briefly at least. Picture the scene. You've just sat down for the weekend of, what did Mountain Dew and Dorito-filled gamers play back then? Gears of War? Modern Warfare? Regardless, you hit the power button and there they are, those three nostalgic flashing red lights. Oh no! How would that 12-year-old from across the globe know that you've his mum now? Yeah, okay, although I was a very different gamer back then, again, I suffered the same outcome. Now, normally, if this sort of thing happened to you, you would ring up Microsoft, wait on hold for 3 hours, and then when they send you a coffin-shaped box, you'd send your broken 360 back to them, and 6 weeks later, you've got a refurbished unit. But there was another method for people out there like me that opened up their 360 and were unable to send it back. We probably shouldn't get into why I opened it up. I'm sure you know. We couldn't send ours back. We looked online and found another solution. We found the towel trick. The instructions were simple. Take your dying Xbox 360, unplug the video cable but leave the power on. Now take 2 or 3 thick bath towels and wrap the entire console, vents and all, like a giant expensive electronic burrito. Then you just let it cook itself for 20 minutes until the plastic is hot enough to fry an egg on the faceplate. And again, yes, I actually did this and it actually worked. Like I said, my 360 had already been previously opened up, so the warranty didn't work, I couldn't send it back. I just decided, you know what, let's see what happens when I wrap this bad boy up in a Lynx smelling scented towel. And that's what I did. The theory was that the 360's GPU was literally peeling off the motherboard because Microsoft used cheap lead-free solder. By wrapping it in towels, you were forcing the console to overheat so much that the solder would melt and reflow back into place. And look, for me at least, it kind of works for about a day or so. You see, while you were trying to melt the solder back into place, you were also baking the life out of every other component on the motherboard. The plastic casing would warp, the capacitors would start to bulge and leak, and the internal fans would scream for mercy. It's the hardware equivalent of trying to fix a broken leg by setting the entire person on fire. Hey look, they're not complaining about their leg anymore, are they? However, yeah, we might have a bigger problem now. The crazy thing about all of this is that Microsoft not only acknowledged that this was happening, but in later interviews with corporate vice president Peter Moore, it actually helped. The top dogs worked out a solution much quicker.
Now, one of the interesting little workarounds was wrapping a towel around it. Yeah, and so that would give some indication that somehow by creating internal heat, which feels like the opposite of what you should be doing, we thought that maybe whatever was going on, and boneyards were growing in the tens of thousands of units in warehouses, at the Best Buys, the Walmarts, the Targets of this world, that maybe it was resoldering. And we think a lot of it was down to actually EU mandate of lead-free solder on some of the motherboards. So I'm still not sure to this day what it was all about.
With all that said, if you still have a 360 with those red lights today, please do me a favour. Just put it in the bin. It's extremely well documented that the best you'll get is an extra week's worth of Bomberman Zero, which is more than you'll ever need. Right, let's move on to a hack that's a little less of a fire hazard and a lot more gravity-based. This is RoboCop Rogue City with over 13,000 very positive reviews. This is one of my all-time favourite games, Ori and the Blind Forest, a game with over 30,000 very positive reviews on Steam, and if you ask me, this is one of the greatest Metroidvania games ever made. For fans of Advance Wars and of course Metal Slug, you've got Metal Slug Tactics with over 10,000 mostly positive reviews. And finally, what about Drug Dealer Simulator? Yeah, apparently this one has close to 9,000 very positive reviews. But besides all of that, you know what else these games have in common? They are less than a few quid. Pounds, bucks, dollars, whatever. And yet again, it's all thanks to this channel's sponsor, Instant Gaming. Every single game that you see on the screen is no more than just a few rubies. Use my link below, make your way over to the site, hit the advanced search, and move that slider down to your desired amount. It's the best way to discover a crazy amount of games for no more than a few buckaroonies. Games like the often forgotten Worms spin-off called Flockers, which plays kinda like a gruesome Lemmings. That is less than £2 currently, as is the very best version of Worms, Worms WMD, which, if you ask me, is an absolute must for every single game library ever. Whatever you decide to buy using my link or scanning the QR code helps the channel more than you know. It takes an incredibly long time to create videos like the ones that you're watching right here, and with that YouTube revenue stream shooting down super fast, it's my Patreons, my YouTube members, and of course, my sponsors like Instant Gaming that keep this whole thing afloat. Thank you all so much for your support, guys. Really, I honestly do mean that. Thank you so much. Once again, use that link down below, use the QR code to support the channel. Hopefully you find some decent games that you like for less than a few quid. But for now, let's get back to the video. Back in the mid-90s, Sony was the new kid on the block. They were making sleek grey machines that looked like they belonged in a high-end stereo stack, and so they should. The original PlayStation is viewed by many audiophiles to be the go-to system to play your CDs. Hey, you, get off my tab. You don't know me and you don't know my style. Heck, Wu-Tang Clan even did a listening party of their uber rare Once Upon a Time in Shaolin album on the device. But, random trivia aside, if you had the SCPH-1001 model, there was a major design flaw under the hood. Turns out that the engineers who worked on it understood thermodynamics about as well as I understand the plot of the Kingdom Hearts franchise. It starts with a skip, then a stutter, and then suddenly your copy of Ridge Racer just stops. You gob onto the disc, you give it a good old wipe on your shirt, but nothing. You try another game, and again, nothing. But then you hear of a fix for some proper jobber at school.
Oi, Slope, you do know if you turn your PlayStation upside down, it fixes it? Dead serious. Flip it over and boom, you're back playing FIFA 96.
And nope, I'm not joking. For a good couple of years, thousands of Sony PlayStations across the world spent more time laying face down than Bonnie Blue. And look, I know what you're thinking. Surely having gravity pushed down doesn't help the laser read the disc better, right? Well, in a dummy's guide kind of way, it kinda did. You see, Sony's engineers, bless them, decided to build the laser assembly out of plastic, and they decided to mount that plastic assembly right next to the power supply, which, as we all know, gets a bit toastier after a few hours of the best game on the system. Turns out, over time, that heat would actually warp the plastic rails that the laser was mounted to, but by putting the system upside down, it was pushing that laser into its correct alignment, therefore being able to read the discs for much longer. In a word, it was scientific. Well, council estate scientific, I suppose. But much like our towel-wrapped 360, this wasn't a fixed, it was very much a temporary solution. The reality was that by putting it upside down, you were forcing a lot of gravity onto the motor that was actually spinning the disc, and eventually it would just warp the plastic anyway, and not even having it in orbit would save it. Sony did eventually fix this in later revisions by moving the laser and using better materials, but still, it proved to be quite the headache for the company's first major release. By the mid-2000s, World Console War 3 was in full swing. And while Sony had stumbled out of the gate at a glacial pace, with a PS3 that cost more than a used hatchback, they had one saving grace: Microsoft's PR disaster. The Red Ring of Death was so catastrophically well documented that the sniggering from Sony fanboys could be heard everywhere from Tokyo to Tunbridge Wells. And if you thought wrapping your 360 in a towel was a bit ridiculous, hold on to your 6-axis controllers, because when the PlayStation 3 had a similar issue, they came up with a much more extreme solution. Yep, we're talking about the lesser well-known Yellow Light of Death. Now, by this point, those bedroom engineers had graduated somewhat. They'd learned from the previous mistakes of the Xbox 360, and they knew that their PlayStation 3s were dying because of lead-free solder that was underneath the processor and was therefore cracked and unable to make a connection. But instead of a towel, a new slightly more complicated fix was devised that sounded like a recipe for disaster. The oven reflow. The instructions were simple. Strip your $500 PlayStation 3 down to its bare motherboard, remove every piece of plastic, every screw, and every drop of thermal paste, and then place that naked high-tech circuit board onto a baking tray, prop it up with 4 balls of tin foil, and chuck it in the oven at 200 degrees Celsius for 10 minutes. I am not making this up. People were literally baking their PlayStation 3 motherboards. The idea was, again, very similar to the 360 towel method. By heating up the entire board to a precise temperature, you were hoping to melt the solder just enough so that it would flow back into the cracks and reconnect the chips. And yes, it was a disaster waiting to happen. See, your kitchen oven is designed for roast dinners, not complicated circuitry. There's a line I didn't think I'd ever have to say. Most ovens have hot spots that vary by 20 to 30 degrees, so while one side of your motherboard was reflowing, the other side was delaminating. I've seen photos of motherboards where the boards and or components have literally popcorns, bubbling up like a bad piece of crackling. Not to mention you were melting every plastic connector that you forgot to remove and, more importantly, releasing toxic fumes in the same place that you cook your kids' fish fingers. But did it work? Well, similar to the towel trick, it gave you a bit of a zombie console. It would groan back to life for a week, maybe a month if you were lucky, before the cheap solder cracked again and you were back to square one. Except now, your house smells like burnt silicon and your baking tray is ruined. The painful thing about this is that this was a common issue for those early fat PlayStation 3s. The best PlayStation 3s for retro gamers, I'd like to add, as they allowed you to play all 3 generations of PlayStation hardware via HDMI. Now, you may be thinking, why didn't they just swap the solder to begin with? And look, that's a logical solution, but by the time that yellow light appeared, it was already too late. The oven trick, just like the towel trick before it, was the final straw. Actually, you know what? There was one other final solution for the 360, and it only cost 4 pence. Let's take a look. Now, we've covered wrapping your console in a towel and we've discussed literally baking your motherboard in an oven. But what if I told you there was a fix for the Xbox 360 that was even more budget? What if I told you that there was a secret to beating the red ring of death and it only cost you 4 pence? This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Heatsink Penny mod. Back in 2009, when the 360's failure rate was higher than Otto from The Simpsons, a theory started making the rounds. This time, another bedroom engineer discovered that if you opened up the 360, you found 4 RAM chips on the underside of the motherboard. Microsoft had covered these with these thin, flimsy thermal pads, which, in case you didn't know, were put on there in order to draw heat away from the components that they were covering. The DIY fix? You would take 4 pennies, one for each of the components, or 8 pennies if you wanted to double up and really splash out. You would then cover them in electrical tape, slap a load of thermal paste on them, and then put them on those components in place of those thermal pads. Again, I am not joking. People were genuinely raiding their copper jars to fix a £300 machine. And look, there were even purists to this on forums, arguing that you had to use pre-1982 pennies because they had a higher copper content for better thermal conductivity. Also, quick side note, if you lose that bit of plastic on the back of your 360 controller, pennies can fix that too. The idea was that these pennies were kind of acting like a heatsink, pulling heat away from those components. But the long and short of it was that this was a placebo. The reality was far more brute force. By sticking 2 pennies on each chip, you were making the motherboard significantly thicker. When you screwed the metal casing back together, you weren't cooling the chips, you were physically crushing them. The pressure was just so immense that it forced the motherboard to bend, physically shoving the GPU back into its socket and reconnecting those cracked solder joints. It worked for a bit until that immense pressure and heat permanently warped your motherboard. Or, even better, the electrical tape melted and the pennies slipped down, causing a potential short circuit that turned your 360 into a very expensive potential sparkler. It's honestly the ultimate redneck repair. Why pay Microsoft for a professional fix when you can just throw 4 pence at the problem and hope for the best? Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. This is the part of the video I give a massive shout out to all of my patrons, all of my YouTube members, all of you people that allow me to make these videos every single week. With an extra big shout out going to the following people. So I'm a little bit distracted today with this guy right here, with this girl right here. Stephen Hafner, Livestream, Thomas Coyote Baxter, Dina81, Kematura Villarreal, Derek Kuda, Enraged Gecko, Akatimo84, Ian Quell, Mind of the Unsane, XZX, Livestream, Andrew Dalton, Bram Perez, British Video Game Nerd, Chevmatic, Chris aka Brackman, Conrad Constantine, To Action Saxon, Dina, Insidious Bliss, Jay's Manchild, Jabba Al Aiden, Jeff Mianowski, Keiju Samurai 1985, Livestream, Mass Replay, Mike Fallon, Nicholas Bertner, Patrick Grip Jansen, Paul Float, Richard Aldergic, Robert Ramsey, Shadow Dragon, Swift Justice Peterson, The Sneaky Ferret, Vidas Varnes, and Ye Old Hamburglar. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really enjoyed making this video. Already well underway on the next couple of videos as well, so expect to see those very soon. And I've got another Kick Scammer coming up as well, because I know it's been a little while since I've done a new Kick Scammer. Yeah, excited to drop that one too. So much love to you guys. Thank you so much for your support. Yeah, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. One more shout out from the cat. Say see you later. Bye. No, she ain't up for it. She don't care. See you later, guys. Bye bye.
Yo, shorty, it's your birthday. We gon' party like it's your birthday. We gon' sip Bacardi like it's your birthday. And you know we don't give up. It's your birthday. You can find me in the club, bottle full of bug. Mama, I got what you need if you need to fill a buzz. I'm in the having sex, I ain't into making love. So come give me a hug again.